Mossdale. My name is Jada.
And I'm Mary.
And this is day 5, Reading Across America. Today we're reading about books that are about influential Americans. And the story is Art is Life, the life of artist Keith Haring.
Keith Haring believed that art should be enjoyed by everyone. When Keith first moved to New York City, he rode the subway and noticed how the crowds were bored and brusque, and the subways were decayed and dreary. He thought the people of New York needed liberating, illuminating, and radiating art. So he bought a stick of white chalk and started drawing. The Joyful Picture Book biography highlights the way Keith Haring's life embodied the message that art is life and life is art. And this is the book about Keith Haring.
When Keith Haring was a small boy in a small town in Pennsylvania, he sat on his father's lap, doodling dragons and dogs, circles and snakes. He shut his eyes and drew fast and sure, scribbling and scrawling yellow and green imaginary things that only he could see. When I grow up, I would like to be an artist, Keith wrote when he was 10. The reason is because I like to draw.
So nearly every minute of every day, Keith drew. Art flowed from his fingers and it welled up inside him, in his heart and in his imagination. Everywhere Keith went, it was as if art was all around him. Art was Keith's life, and his life was art.
When Keith was a teenager studying in Pittsburgh, an artist named Cristo came to speak at the Carnegie Museum of Art. In California, Cristo had built a fabric fence 18 feet high and 24 miles long. The slender white lines dashed and darted, weaved and wagged over hills, around bends, across roads and rocks, until it stretched far out, disappearing into the sea. Just like the art that skipped and hopped and snapped and popped inside Keith's head.
At first, some people didn't like Cristo's art, but once they saw the dancing river of cloth, they began to understand something new about art, about beauty, and about the world we live in. As Keith watched Cristo's film and heard him speak, he understood too. The public needs art, he wrote in his journal. Art is for everybody. Art is life, and life is art.
When Keith was 20, he attended the School of Visual Arts in New York. He taped long strips of paper over the classroom walls and rolled even more across the floor. With a brush and a pot of paint, he swooped and he swung, he lined and he stripped. Black paint splashed as the thick brush dashed, swiping patterns to the beat of loud, thumping music, the way his father had taught him when he was small, until finally the whole room was covered with strange shapes that rumbled inside Keith's brain.
And Keith was left with art all around him. Art is life, and life is art. As much as the teachers and students and everybody else loved Keith's lively art, they loved Keith, his enthusiasm and exuberance, his joy and jubilance even more.
In New York, Keith rode the subway. The stations were decayed, dank, and dreary. The subway cars heaved, hot and hectic, and the crowds bounced, brusque and bored, as they stared at black paper pasted over placards where old advertisements had been stripped away.
Keith knew that the streets and the subways and the people of New York needed art all around them too. Art that could make their imaginations dance and prance, roar and soar, just like the art inside Keith's head. So one day, just a bit more than a year after he'd arrived in the city, Keith had an artful idea.
He ran up the subway station stairs to the street, and he bought a stick of white chalk. Art is life, he thought to himself. Then he marched back down into the subway station. Life is art.
Chalk dust swirled as Keith's art unfolded everywhere. Chalk dust swirled as Keith's art unfurled where everyone could see it. Ringed with rays of light and energy, radiant babies crawled. Washed with the waves of sound and commotion, joyful dogs barked. Stunned by sketches of dancing men and spaceships and robots and dollar bills, surprised commuters stopped and stared. And some of them began to imagine and understand and laugh and cheer and clap their hands.
Police stopped him and sometimes even arrested him for drawing on the walls. Sometimes Keith was scared for himself and for other young artists whose work came under attack. But sometimes I finish, he said, and there's applause from the whole station.
There were people who thought his pictures were just scribbles. They said he was making a mess. Others thought his pictures were gorgeous. They believed he was making masterpieces.
Before long, Keith was invited to hang his pictures in art galleries, but he would keep sneaking them onto alley walls too.
He painted boisterous crowds hugging or cheering or working together. He built massive sculptures that filled park lawns and tiny ones that fit on shelves. He drew winged angels and a man with 3 eyes and dancing cats and throbbing hearts. Art is life. Life is art, he remembered.
Almost overnight, it seemed, Keith and his radiant babies and barking dogs and zapping robots and all the rest of his creations were famous. But he still wanted everyone to see and feel art all around them. In 1986, he opened a store in the Soho department of New York City and called it the Pop Shop. He made pictures against racism and drug abuse, pictures supporting unity and love, and toys and t-shirts, posters and pens, inexpensive art anyone could take home. He welcomed everyone to come and see, and even to buy, kids from the Bronx who spray painted graffiti, and ladies from Park Avenue who were draped in minks and pearls.
Down the streets, Keith's art popped on shirts and sneakers. On museum walls, Keith's dogs barked at Monet's water lilies and Picasso's acrobats.
From New York to California, Tokyo to Paris, Keith painted everywhere, for everyone. Some of his artwork made grown-ups blush. Others made children laugh and old people smile. Most of all, Keith's art made people dream and imagine and think and understand a little more than they had before about art and life and the world we live in.
Keith Haring died in February 1990 when he was just 31 years old, but his art still surrounds us today. Pictures that make people smile and laugh and cry and think, drawings that buzz and whir and shout and whisper, paintings that look simple but help us understand complicated ideas, art that inspires and inquires and opens imaginations. Like Keith Haring, the artist whose life was a work of art.